Hello! In this video lecture, we'll be discussing the ancient Sumerian religions. So let's talk about geography first. Sumer is in southern Mesopotamia, right around here. Mesopotamia, as I had mentioned previously, emerged as one of the first civilizations on Earth around 4000 BCE. And around this time you see several different civilizations emerging. We have Mesopotamia, which really is one of the most important ones. We saw civilizations emerging in China, India, Peru, and Egypt. So these first five civilizations created in certain aspects the basic ideas of what civilization is. Scholars believe that the very first city in the world was the Sumerian city of Eridu, which is right here. And remember, which is right here, is where Abraham, who is the father of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, was born. And this city was settled by farmers, fishermen, and herders. Kind of a confluence of different job types that led to the development of a city. And again, remember, ancient civilizations all tended to grow up around bodies of water. So you have water here, you have the Tigris, you have the Euphrates rivers, and these are the main water sources that led to the development of this ancient civilization. So why do we know so much about Sumerians? And it's essentially the same reason we know so much about the Egyptians, because they developed a form of writing. The Sumerians called their writing cuneiform, and it emerged around 3000 BCE, and this form of writing is how we know much of their society. This is a very rough idea of how their alphabet worked, because mostly they use symbols, not so much letters to spell things out. Our modern alphabet is actually based on the Phoenician model. So the Sumerians were using their writing as a way to keep track of trade. You know, if I'm trading with a neighboring city and I am trading them corn for rice, and there is not enough to balance out, and I owe them a few hundred pounds of rice, somebody needs to keep track of it. So these are the kinds of elements that were being used in the beginning. And then eventually writing gets to be used for other things, specifically writing down what is going on. You know, who are the gods? Who's in charge? What are the political situations? What are the wars? Sumer was a polytheistic society, and polytheism is the belief in many gods. Each city-state had its own god, its own temples, and its own priest kings. And at the height of the Sumerian civilization, there were an estimated 3,600 gods and goddesses. And here's just a few of the statuary of the gods and goddesses. The Sumerians believed that humans were created by the gods out of clay and were put on earth to serve and take care of the gods. Sumerian temples became the centralized part of a town. And basically, and we go back to the idea of sacrifice here, is if the gods aren't happy, they become cranky and they take it out on human beings. So the Sumerians believed that to keep the gods happy, they must sacrifice or give gifts to the gods. And these sacrifices ranged from all kinds of food, grains, vegetables, to live animals and other goods. The gifts were taken to the temple, which is called the ziggurat, and given to the priests. So a lot of times what you would end up having is there would be food stored down in the bottom massive piece of this, and then donations or sacrifices were brought up to the top, because remember, you know, you have to go up to get to the gods. And there you see a smaller representation of the steps and taking the sacrifices up. So they believed that the priests could speak to the gods and offer them the gifts of the people. The ziggurat became the center of town, not just because of the religious piece of it up here, but also because it was where the food was stored. Sumerian theology is very specific, and they believe that the universe consisted of a flat disk enclosed by a tin dome surrounded by a saltwater sea. And again, all of these things can be found very easily within their purview of what they're seeing. Tin was a common metal that was seen back in those days, and it was reflective. So why is the sky blue? Because it reflects the ocean. And so their reasoning is very sound. And of course, you know, the sea is salt water. So of course that would make sense that the world is surrounded by salt water. The Sumerian afterlife involved a descent into a gloomy netherworld to spend eternity in a wretched existence as a Gidam, or a ghost. So we're not seeing yet the idea of heaven or hell. We're not seeing punishment. Essentially what we're seeing is, once you're dead, you're out of luck. You're going to have this wretched existence. So life is very important for these folks. They're not looking at what happens after death. They're looking at what happens while they're still alive. And that's an important thing to reflect on, because we're going to see an evolution in how people see afterlife. You know, what happens after we die. So let's look at some of the Sumerian gods and goddesses. The Sumerians worship Namu, who's right here. She is goddess of the sea. On, this is this handsome fella over here, who was the god of the sky. His consort is Ki, and consort is kind of a unofficial wife. She's the main girl in his life, and she was the goddess of earth. So these three, the sea, the sky, the earth, the three main elements of their world. On and Ki have a child named Enlil, who is god of air, who serves as head of the gods until he's banished for raping the goddess of the air, Ninlil. Here's it, Enlil, and then Ninlil. Enlil is sent to the underworld. Ninlil gives birth to Nana, god of the moon, who's also known as Sin or Suin. Enlil claims Nana as his son, marries Ninlil, and he returns to the top of the pantheon of gods. Now, the whole purpose of this story for humans is to show the value of claiming one's wife and children. It was far too easy to get someone pregnant and then walk away. So this major story, this mythology, shows men that they need to be responsible and accept their children and marry their wives and all of those good things. Then we have Enki, who is worshipped in Eridu. And remember, Eridu was the very first city on earth. Enki is the god of beneficence. He is the ruler of the freshwater depths beneath the earth and represents male fertility and all knowledge. And if you see this picture of him over here, he's got a fish on his head. And it may be a little silly nowadays, but for him, you know, this is a great thing because it represents that life is in the oceans, and that this is where the world came from, is the oceans. So, you know, this is 5,000, 6,000 years ago these folks were living, and they had a fairly good idea of basic science that we understand today. Ninhursag is the wife of Enki. She is the mother goddess, and she nourishes the kings of Sumer. And again, you know, we've talked about fertility symbols. Here again, you have a woman. She is accentuating her bosom. Her hips are rounded, her belly is rounded, and her genital region is pulled out in decorative style to kind of reflect the idea of being the mother figure. Then we have Ishtar, who was the goddess of love and war, and her cult involved sacred prostitution, which is something that was pretty popular back then and has died out. Sacred prostitution is sexual ritual consisting of sexual activity performed in the context of religious worship, usually involving a donation to the temple. And essentially, here's the basic idea here, is that you are a woman, and once a year you must go to Ishtar's temple, and you must provide service. Now, how does this work? A man comes in, he drops a donation in the donation box, he gets to have sex with you, and then he leaves. This is religious worship. At the end of the day, you've done your service, you get to go home to your husband and children, and the temple and Ishtar, more importantly, is pleased with you. So this concept, of course, does not really represent in any modern day religion, but we as religious people will go to church and do a cleanup. In springtime, we go out and we plant shrubs and trees at the church. So, we engage in rituals that are not quite as sexual, but we're still donating our time and energy to our religious environments, just not involving sacred prostitution. So, one of the things that we're going to be looking at through most of these religious histories is the myths that seem to be representative in each of the major religions. So we're going to start off with the garden myth. Now, the Christian myth, the one that most of us are most familiar with, and this is the same myth for Jews, Christians, and Muslims, is the idea that, God created the earth in 7 days. 6 days, seventh day he rested. He created Adam. From Adam's rib, he creates Eve. Eve and Adam are in the Garden of Eden. They're popping it. They're having a great time. And they're told they can do anything they want except eat from the tree of knowledge. And of course, that's when the snake shows up and convinces Eve she should eat from the tree of knowledge. God finds out, he throws them out of Eden, and things don't go so well for humanity after that. The Sumerians have their own garden myth, and this myth is the goddess Nin-Her-Sag creates a beautiful garden full of lush vegetation and fruit trees called Eden-Nu. Sound familiar? Nin-Her-Sag charged Enki, her husband, with controlling the wild animals and tending the garden. But Enki becomes curious about the garden and he eats 8 different plants. Again, we have certain characteristics that are very familiar to those of us who are more familiar with the Christian-based or Jewish-based garden myth. This enraged Nin-Her-Sag, and she caused Enki to fall ill. Enki feels a pain in his rib, which is a pun in Sumerian, as the word ti means both rib and life. Nin-Her-Sag then creates a new goddess named Ninti, a name made up of Nin, meaning lady, plus Ti for rib, or lady of the rib, who cures Enki. Now, of course, the garden myth is a little bit different in the Christian philosophy. However, there's a lot of the same concepts. The rib, eating what they're not supposed to be eating, not following the rules. And if you think about these items in the context of what religion is supposed to do, which is to keep us on the straight and narrow and live good moral lives, what we're seeing here is you should listen to your wife. Alright, another one that I wanted to look at is the myth of the Deluge, or the flood myth. And this, again, Sumerian. The flood comes about because mankind makes too much noise, angering the chief god Enlil, who can't sleep because of all this racket. Enki warns Susudra, the king of Sumer, that the gods have commanded that a flood will sweep over the city. Enki tells Susudra to to build a boat and fill it with living creatures. The flood lasts 7 days and 7 nights, wiping out most of mankind. Now, the interesting part, because, with all of these mythologies, there is a full-bore attempt to demonstrate where these mythologies come from in terms of what the researchers do. And archaeological evidence demonstrates that there was, in fact, a great flood in this area around 3500 BCE. So, what we look at here is people are trying to explain why nature has done things. Because again, they don't understand climate, they don't understand barometric pressure, they don't understand weather forecasting. They have general ideas. So these mythologies, in a lot of ways, are there to explain things. This information will be on the quiz next week. If you have any questions, please email me or text me, and I hope you have a good day.